Right now, we want to be very clear. There is no shelter in place for the city limits of Deer Park. There is no shelter in place. If you do see a warning about that, we should mention that there is a shelter in place for industrial neighbors for that ITC area and, of course, San Jacinto State Historic Site. Again, no shelter in place has been ordered for the city of Deer Park, but we are following this case because obviously there have been concerns about flare-ups. There have been concerns about the benzene in the air, so we wanted to come to you and let you know kind of the latest of what was going on. Again, a partial collapse of a dike wall. Also, we're getting some more information right now. The Battleground State Park was closed already, so no threat to the public there, no people on site. That is great news. And again, that shelter in place is very limited. I'll give this phone back. The shelter in place is very limited, again, of course, to the industrial area right there, ITC area, and San Jacinto State Historic Site. So just wanted to keep you guys up to date. We've been trying to bring you the latest information. So many of you have appreciated the small updates. And again, we're trying to get eyes on that site. Absolutely. So we're going to have our managing editor come over. We've been on our phones for the last hour trying to get the latest information. Again, trying to get visuals, a site. Of course, the concern since the fire was put out was that there would be any reignition, any flare-ups of that fire. Of course, keeping that under control means keeping some of the chemicals that have been burning in our air under control. So these are all lingering concerns that we've had to deal with and we've been keeping eyes on since the fire was officially extinguished at 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning. So again, we're going live with this information, wanting to keep you updated because people, especially folks who live in that area, work in that area, have been really concerned, of course, about air quality, the reignition of that fire, and of course any further shelter-in-place orders that might be in effect. But again, the city of Deer Park just wanted to let us know, and they actually told us via Twitter. That's when we've been getting most of our information. It's a great way to get information from officials as soon as possible. That again, the dike wall containing the product that was released during the fire has collapsed partially. We don't know what the effects of this will be, but it's certainly of concern, and so we're checking into it and hoping to get more information. If you're just joining us, there is no shelter in place for the city of Deer Park, so that is good to know. If you live in the area, you're free to come and go. You've not been told to stay inside, but there is a shelter in place for the industrial neighbors and, of course, San Jacinto State Historic Site, which was already closed today. So that is good to know that it's not a threat to the public there. Thank you for joining us. Again, we are bringing you these updates live from a KHOU 11 newsroom because we want to get the latest information out there to you. We realize that some of you might not find this significant, but again, we are still watching this because the aftermath of this fire is still an issue and there are effects that are lingering. So we want to make sure that you have the latest information. Randy's right here. Do you have anything, Randy, or people commenting or asking questions about kind of the specifics right now?
No, not right now. Nothing specific. I'm going through right now. So
absolutely. Thank you. If you have any questions, please send them to us. We're going to get them answered as soon as possible. But we felt necessary to bring you this update because this is important information. Managing Editor Bill Bishop is getting more answers right now. He's calling Deer Park and... All right. So he's coming momentarily. We're going to stand by. But again, don't want to cause any panic. Don't want anybody to mix up this information. There is no shelter in place for Deer Park, for the city limits right now. So you guys are okay there. Again, we are dealing with a partially collapsed dike. We're trying to figure out what that means exactly. Trying to get some chemical and industrial engineers in here to kind of give us a better idea, because obviously if you don't work in this field, if you don't understand this profession, it doesn't make sense to a lot of us. So we definitely are looking for answers in the way of that. So again, standing by to get more information specifically from Deer Park. Also want to know if this partially collapsed dike is going to have effects later on, if there's any fires that have been reignited. That has been a concern. When we heard from officials after the fire was extinguished, we were told that they were worried about possible flare-ups, but they said as the hours go on, those chances would lessen. So we're hoping that this is just a structural issue and doesn't have any effect, of course, on our air quality. But again, state, local officials have been monitoring our air quality, and they are giving us readings, and we're staying on top of that because, of course, these effects are lingering well after that fire was put out. Let's see, Bill Bishop is here now. Bill, come on in.
Okay.
What have you learned so far? Who have you talked to?
Okay, what we've learned is that this is coming Public Information Office for ITC.
What is ITC saying?
That they've learned of a partial breach of the tank farm. You know, there's about 15 tanks in a tank farm, and there's containment walls around them. So in this set of tanks that has had these problems, you know, in the past week, they have a partial breach of the tank farm's secondary containment wall on the north side of the tank farm, near tank 80-7. We've heard that, you know, each of these tanks recently, they have specific numbers. And have specific things in them. So the breach is near tank 80-7. Now, that doesn't mean that there's product coming out of 80-7. It could be from any of the tanks. But this happened about 12:30, and so ITC is advising its industrial neighbors, which means these companies that are around ITC on the north side of 225, Highway 225, they're advising them, and they're advising the Battleship Texas Monument and the State Park. That means, like, you know, San Jacinto Monument, Battleship Texas, that area that people go to visit. They're advising them to consider taking shelter-in-place precautions. They can't order them to. They can only suggest that they do it.
I understand that San Jacinto Park was closed today as well. So
well, if that's true, then that's
good news that no one was out there right now. But you're talking about industrial neighbors and folks in those areas. They're asking them to shelter in place.
Right. So what they're describing to us is, you know, they've been doing this tank cleanup out there. They've got containment walls around them that are always there. As these fires have happened and chemicals have gotten out and they've foamed them and they get out, there's liquid inside these containment walls. So there's a partial breach in the secondary containment wall, and they told me they don't know how big the breach is or how much product, whatever that product is, has gotten through there, pardon the phone, has gotten through there.
And they know that this has come from one of the tanks that has burned, or are they still trying to figure out the source?
They're
they
still
just
trying,
know it's
they're
from
trying
that
to figure
outside
out,
dike.
and that's what I'm saying. There's so many tanks that have been involved now, and different chemicals in those tanks. Some of this stuff is out on the ground. It may have been foamed down or put water on it or whatever it is. And so whatever is around these tanks, inside those containment walls, some of it has gotten through the secondary containment wall. Some kind of breach in it, not sure how big. Some of the chemicals have gotten through, not sure how much. Still got to figure out what the chemicals are. And so they're saying that they're coordinating with state, fed, and local officials trying to resolve this as soon as possible. And they're taking measures right now to try to contain the release.
So unclear how many gallons and of what has spilled out of that sort of containment wall. So that's what we're talking about. This could obviously affect, as they're doing water samples, they're doing air samples. We don't know the effects yet of that. So we're waiting to hear about that.
That's correct.
And again, unclear what chemicals are there. And we just don't know how bad this is. It could just be like a cleanup, or it could lead to something else. Have they said anything about, I know that reignition was an issue that they've been talking about. They said it would lessen as the hours went on, as the days went on, but we were worried about more flare-ups. They didn't say anything in the way of that?
No, nothing about that. Just that they had this partial breach and this partial release of chemical product, and they're trying to figure out what it is. And I know we were all worried in here, does that mean it's the product with benzene in it? Since we just went through that scare. But they don't know. They don't know what the product is right now. They've got to figure that. It could be a mix of products that have been on the ground outside these tanks that have potentially gone through this gap.
And we're working to get eyes on the situation. I know that is Air 11 up and on the way?
Yes, Air 11's up and on the way.
All right, so we're hopefully going to get more of that. So if you're watching us right now, this is Managing Editor Bill Bishop, who's giving us the latest information from ITC. So it sounds like there has been a breach and sort of a perimeter that was keeping all of those chemicals, all of the runoff from the foam and the water contained. There's been a partial breach of one of the walls. Don't know how much of anything has spilled. We don't know what has spilled out. We don't know what the cleanup situation is right now. We are trying to get aerial views of that, see if we can get you a better picture, and hopefully show you soon in our later newscast. In the meantime, there is no shelter in place for the city of Deer Park, and we want to make that very clear because we don't want people panicking about that when they see shelter in place. We've put on our website that the shelter in place is for industrial neighbors close to that ITC facility.
And that's recommended.
And that's recommended.
That's suggested by ITC.
Suggested by ITC. It looks like we have some more information. Denise, do you want to come in and let us know, and we'll get you mic'd up. And thank you for bearing with us. We want to get you this information, and sometimes we just have to do it in this fashion. So come on in. Tell me what you've learned, Denise.
Here's what I want to find out about. When I talked about all this what is he talking about with this dam? What is all this? So we talked to it's an information center that they've got set up to help take care of all this.
Okay.
So this dam that everybody's talking about, so imagine what this place looks like. You've got all the tanks and all that. So where this dam, which is about 6 foot high, I'm like 5'7", so this dam is earthen, got like this, so they had a partial breach, which we don't know why, and they don't know why yet. So they're just trying to get the information like we are. So we had a partial breach somehow of this dam that's on the north side of the facility.
Okay.
That's away from 225.
Okay.
That's what's really important. That's where a lot of the people are, right? A lot of the neighborhoods are like south of 225 on that side. So this is the more industrial area on the north side of the dam.
Okay.
On this earthen dam. So what they're trying to do with this partial breach is go ahead and contain it, but they're asking their industrial neighbors, all the folks to the north, the San Jacinto Monument, the Battleground, which is already closed, right? We already know that. So that's the bottom line. That's the way this dam is working, and it's partially collapsed. We don't know why.
Thank you.
That's what we've got for right now.
Okay.
And they're talking about, what do you got here?
So this is what you've been talking about, the partial breach of the tank farm secondary containment wall on the north side, tank 80-7. This happened shortly before 12:30 this afternoon. And again, the advice here is for industrial neighbors and, of course, people at the Battleship Texas and Monument State Park to consider sheltering in place. There's no mandatory shelter in place, and there's no shelter in place for the city of Deer Park. So we want to make that very clear to our viewers.
That's probably does
You're
not
doing
affect you, okay?
But this, of course, brings up more concerns about, as we've been testing air quality and water quality, is this going to affect anything? Is this, if whatever has been breached, we don't know how many gallons of what has spilled out. We don't know what has spilled out.
We do have some idea.
Okay, so what do we know about that?
Getting back to our dam and all that, the tank that was affected, according to what the Joint Information Center is that's set up for this dam had, the tank contained pie gas. Now, one component of pie gas is the benzene. Right? Right, that magic word. So anyway, oh, great, yeah.
So if I just hold the phone,
Yes,
he'll be there in
absolutely.
1 second.
Hi there, this is Rekha Muttaraj. We're standing by to hear from the mayor.
Yes, this is Mayor Bouchon from the city of Deer Park.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready for him?
We are, and I just hope he knows we are doing a Facebook Live right now. We're live over our social media channel, so I just want him to be aware.
Yes. Sir, this is going to be what's coming through on the stream right now when you talk to these people, okay? All right. Here's the mayor.
Okay.
Hello, this is Mayor Mouton.
Hi, Mayor Mouton. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want you to know again that we are live streaming on our KHOU 11 Facebook page and our other social media pages. So thank you so much for giving us an update. This is Rekha Muttaraj. Tell us a little bit about what's happening right now.
Well, I mean, since you've called me, you most probably know what we've been pushing out from the city of Deer Park. So from that perspective, I'm not going to repeat what we've pushed out. So at this time, we're still not getting any readings of elevation whatsoever. So we're just maintaining a status quo, waiting to respond if that need arises. But right now, most of my information that's coming in is just trying to assess and keep an update in regards to what's happening at the scene. But they are actively working to control the spill, and that's pretty much all I know at this point.
Do we know what has spilled out? Do we have any idea of what has come out of that partially collapsed dike?
No, not really. And even if there was some aspects of definition, you have to add in the content that it's got foam and water and everything else that's been sprayed on it. So it's not the containers itself. It's only what was in the bottom of that in dike area, that enclosure.
Okay, that is good to know. And of course, we don't know the amount right now. We don't know how big of a spill this is.
We don't. We're still assessing that. They've put booms at the scene and are already making plans to try to repair the dike to contain it, and they're trying to attempt to control what got out. But from that regard, it's so active. We're just working minute by minute. But from what I'm seeing, I'm very, very pleased that I've yet to see any levels of reading at all. So not sure why, other than maybe that just said there wasn't a whole lot of the stuff that we're worried about, which is in the tanks in that basin bottom.
So right now, as far as you know, there's no threat to any public safety, and especially to the folks who live in Deer Park.
No, there's not.
Okay. Moving forward, as you guys keep an eye on this, you know, we've been talking about the chance of reignition and flames still popping up and some hot spots. Obviously, as you guys have been saying, the threat of that, you know, goes down with each passing hour. With this leak, is that another concern that's come up to the top again, or is that not an issue right now?
It's not an issue. Nothing's really changed. So far as the conditions with the tanks, they're still spraying foam, so really nothing's changed with that, and they ceased trying to remove any product. So, I mean, really nothing's changed other than the inevitable of the dike breached, and we were not anticipating that. So they're responding as they need to based on what we're seeing from the EOC.
Okay, all right. Thank you again. And just want to, can you just reiterate for our viewers who are watching this, again, you hear a shelter-in-place order and then people will kind of panic, but there's no shelter-in-place for Deer Park. It's just for the neighboring industries. Is that correct?
It was recommended, but it's only for the immediate scene,
Okay.
basically the way I understand it. And in some cases, it was as much of a precaution because they would just to be cautious. They was not for sure, but there's been no readings that's indicated any elevation at all.
Okay. Mayor Mouton, thank you so much for checking in with us. We really appreciate it. I know that you guys have been staying on top of the situation, and we're so happy that you've been able to give us the latest. Just finally, what is your plan to communicate with the public? I mean, obviously, this is, as you keep saying, a dynamic situation. Things keep changing. Moving forward, how do you plan to communicate with the public, say if something happens in the middle of the night or this ends up being a bigger problem than realized? What do you guys plan on doing?
Well, from the one aspect of what we can control is from the City of Deer Park's perspective, we will be pushing out any prudent information that we feel is necessary for the City of Deer Park, and I'm currently at the Harris County Emergency Management, and I'm confident in telling you that they're going to be doing the same here. So anything that pertains to of an importance of public safety is going to be pushed out as quickly as possible.
Okay, and what venues will you be using to do that?
I will most probably be going between where I'm at right now, Harris County Emergency Management, and Deer Park until this incident is totally the risk is totally removed.
Okay. You know, there were some issues. We had some viewers write into us saying that they didn't hear the sirens. I know that one went off, and I believe one or two did not, and so that was a concern moving forward. Have you been able to fix those issues, or have you found a different way to let people know if say there's
talking about the incident from a few days ago with the City of Deer Park?
Yes.
Is that the one you were talking about? Yes, it has been addressed, and I had confirmation this morning that it's been serviced, and to all indications, it's prepared to operate as it's supposed to.
Okay, good, because that was the concern for folks who said, hey, I was sleeping, I didn't get the warning, and I headed out before I knew that there was a shelter in place. Okay, thank you so much for answering my questions. Anything else that I didn't ask you that the public will need to know about?
No, at this point, we're just trying to, monitor the scenario that's going on.
All right. Mayor Mouton, thank you so much again for checking in. We appreciate your time, and we'll be in touch with you in the next few days again. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to hand this phone back. Thank you to our viewers for staying with us. I know it seems like there's a lot going on, but actually, Jeremy Rogalski, our investigative reporter, has more right now. Jeremy, what have you found?
Let me throw the mic on here, Rika.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to throw some perspective, really, to this, because we hear about exactly where this is. And so this is readyharris.org, and I hope this can show up on this. We'll try to get the glare.
Yeah.
But this bullseye right here, that's the ITC site, okay? So this is Independence Parkway.
Okay. Would you like me to hold it so you can
no, that's fine.
Okay.
225 is down here. But the
Okay.
shelter in place, again, is just for the San Jacinto Battleground Historic Site. So this legend on the key, you could see an inch is about a mile. So we're just talking about a half a mile. So that's where Battleground and Battleship Texas and the monument is. So we're north of 225.
Okay.
Nothing really residential here. We're looking at readyharris.org, which of course is the air monitoring map provided by Harris County's Emergency Management Office that we've been talking about for the past couple days. So all I really wanted to do is, you know, our Facebook viewers to offer some perspective here as we're looking at it. Again, that bullseye is where the ITC site is. The battleground historic site, San Jacinto Battleground Monument, is just really next door to it. So when they talk about the industrial neighbors and the San Jacinto site, we're talking very, very, very close proximity. So perspective and context, a far different shelter-in-place scenario, and it bears repeating, than we experienced yesterday, Reka, because yesterday, again, we're talking from Beltway 8, you know, a big box basically around that. This is a much, much smaller area.
And it's an industrial area. We want to mention it's not to the neighboring area in Deer
Certainly.
Park.
Now, that's not to diminish the importance of this, because as you can see, we're right along the waterway here that spills out into the ship channel and goes downstream into Galveston Bay. Not to put any carts before any horses, because we don't know, again, what the product was, the levels of the product, the volume of the product, and how diluted the product was. But again, just for context and perspective, we're looking at a far, far smaller shelter-in-place area. Bears repeating, folks, not the city of Deer Park itself, not the residential neighbors.
And from our understanding, the San Jacinto Park may have even been closed today, so
that is our information as well.
That no one was there, which is good in this case. That they have
oftentimes you have field trips with various students out there, and you know, on another day, another week, another scenario. It could have been a far different scenario, but yes, our understanding is that facility is closed as well.
Can you explain the green dots to viewers who are watching this, wondering what that is?
We did a story on this yesterday about really a truth check on these dots, and Harris County in the last 24 hours has made a lot of changes to this site. To answer your question, each of these green dots represents a reading of air quality. So if we just pick one at random here and click on it, we're going to see less than 0.5 parts per million for benzene level readings as of military time 8:16. So that would be 8:16 this morning. So again, green means you know, that there's not a threat. And if I can get back to this, okay, it launched me to the main page. But each one of those sites, again, we saw a lot of green dots, which is good. We saw one single red dot just north of ITC this morning. And during this morning's news conference, our colleague David Gonzalez talked about a 4.3 parts per million reading, and really asked some very tough questions of officials back then. And they say, listen, we haven't been able to replicate that or see any sustained levels, which is good. But again, those are air monitoring portable devices that are sending information on air quality, testing for benzene and other volatile organic compounds back to the county, and then the county has a quality control process, turns that information around, publishes it on readyharris.org for the public to see.
And if there were sustained levels of that, that's when they would put a shelter in place. But clearly, because it didn't last for longer than a certain period of time, they didn't.
And each one of those dots we saw represents a snapshot in time. So it could be, as we saw, 8:16 this morning. That's one reading at 8:16. You know, and of course, being portable, you actually have, you know, human beings with these devices going around the area and taking measurements. You know, they may start one here at one point and go a quarter mile down the road and take another measurement 5 minutes later, and then go over. You know, that's why you see that smattering of dots. So
absolutely.
But a good interview with the City of Deer Park's mayor offering, you know, some more clarity to the situation. To recap again, the high points from the mayor.
We're talking about a partial breach of a secondary containment wall that, of course, was housing all of those tanks with those hazardous chemicals. That many of those tanks catching fire on Sunday. That fire finally being put out at 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning. But again, there have been concerns about flare-ups. There have been concerns about reignition, concerns about air quality and water quality. We had that shelter in place in Deer Park. So the last couple of days, as you keep hearing from officials, they've been dynamic. It's a dynamic situation that keeps changing. I'm sorry, we're trying to get back into our camera. But we just want to let you know that this all happened just before 12:30 this afternoon. afternoon, and we are hearing from officials. They have reassured us that there is no threat to public safety. There is a suggested shelter in place for nearby for shelter in place really in the ITC facility.
Industrial
Industrial
neighbors and the
neighbors.
San Jacinto Historic Site, which
yeah.
we understand is closed.
Is
So we're
closed
looking
today.
at a very small perimeter. Just looking at that map, it appeared to be roughly in the half-mile range. Again, not the city of Deer Park itself, not the residential neighborhoods at this point. But still a lot of questions to be answered.
Absolutely. And people are still kind of on edge with what has been happening over the last
Certainly.
few days, which is why we felt like we needed to get online and get you this information as soon as possible. Nothing to worry about right now, and if you're in the Deer Park area, you are not under a shelter-in-place order, but just so you are aware of what is going on, we just want to make sure we keep you informed. Please, again, send us your questions, send us your concerns. We are trying to get you answers as really the fallout continues from the ITC fire. But I think that's it for now. You've got the information that you need, and of course we're staying on top of the situation. We're trying to get you visuals of what exactly is happening. I know that Air 11 is flying over the scene, so we're going to get you that in our later newscasts, 4, 5, and 6, and of course 10 o'clock we're going to get you those visuals, show you what exactly happened today, what the impact is, and if it's something that the public needs to be worried about. But right now it is just a breach of a secondary containment wall. We're still working to get more answers as to just how big of a breach this is, how much liquid has come out, what is in there, and it sounds like we're gonna stay with this actually because wow. All right, so we've got well, we're glad that our viewers are tuning into us and wanting to get these updates because this has been a long ordeal for folks living in the Deer Park area, Jeremy. I mean, you've been mapping the levels. People have been worried about the levels of the benzene, especially with the release yesterday. Let me go ahead.
Well, I think the big thing now is we want to see it, right?
Yes.
And we're efforting those pictures from Air 11 because, you talk about a dike wall. I have calls into the University of Houston to, try to get more, some expertise to kind of paint that picture. What is a dike wall? What we heard from our managing editor, Bill Bishop, and then from the mayor is a secondary containment area, around these tanks. Of course, earlier today, we knew there was upwards of 20,000 gallons of benzene or benzene-rich liquid in there that they were trying to transfer from one tank to a safer compartment. And in doing so, they mentioned that during that transfer process, they were actually had to put a pump inside one of those tanks, and they were concerned about possible vaporing because you have this layer of foam on top of these tanks, as it was described to us, and when you stick that pump in there, it can agitate that protective layer of foam. So we heard this morning that there was a concern, it doesn't look like that has played out earlier, that agitation in this transferring of these chemicals might stir up some of those vapors.
Got it.
That's a separate issue than we're talking about here. And so again, we're hearing that this secondary containment wall, which I'm guessing is temporary. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And the mayor of Deer Park, Mayor Mouton, had called in a few minutes ago to give us an update and wanted to tell us a few things about that. He said right now, obviously, cleanup happened almost immediately, and so they're beginning to make repairs to that dike. They've set up some booms in the area to kind of contain what has spilled out from that partially collapsed wall. Again, we just don't know how much. Right now, we don't know exactly what we're dealing with because we're trying to get eyes on it.
Sorry to interrupt you,
go ahead.
Rake.
No, absolutely. What has come in?
Fact point of new information coming in. Our assistant news director is telling us now that the ship channel right behind that area, just to the north of ITC, is closed temporarily. Is that correct? That's correct. So that is certainly an important piece of information as it's coming into the newsroom. Again, the ship channel. That ITC facility is just to the south. Well, it basically borders the ship channel.
Yep.
At Independence Parkway, and so again, that is very important, and we'll continue to stay on top of that. We're going to bring in Chief Mineralogist David Paul. I'm going to hand things over. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, because I'm going to check on a couple of things.
And as David Paul gets mic'd up, we just want to mention again that the mayor of Deer Park has reassured us that the cleanup has begun. They've set up booms to catch any of that liquid or any substance that is spilled out at the scene. They're trying to repair the dike tank as soon as possible. But right now, no threat to public safety, no shelter-in-place order for the city of Deer Park specifically. But let's talk about...
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
What you're saying is good. So far, so good, right?
So far, so good.
And we've got a little leak in the containment facility. Is that correct?
That's right. We've got it in one of the containment walls, the secondary containment wall.
So, of course, my job is to check the winds.
Absolutely.
And this has been a big player because whether they're very calm or very active really changes the whole dynamic of the threat from the benzene fumes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now, they are out of the south.
Okay.
Very light at about 5 to 10 miles an hour. So what's north of the facility? Well, first it's the ship channel itself. So really a light south breeze might be the best scenario for this because there's a lot of open space over the ship channel.
Keep it out of the neighborhoods, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Push it away.
And give it a little bit of space to maybe diffuse a little bit. To spread out so that those fumes wouldn't be so concentrated in those levels that are dangerous to people. So that's good.
And the ship channel's closed now, as we just heard, so that'll keep people out of the area as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Now, if the levels were to be very high and the wind were to continue to blow it to the north, you've got Channel View and Cloverleaf on the other side of the ship channel, Buffalo Bayou. So those two neighborhoods, those two areas, again, Channel View, Cloverleaf, north side of Buffalo Bayou, you're directly north of where the ITC facility is and where this chemical leak is happening. Again, you're saying no shelter in place, right?
No shelter in place for Deer Park, but they are asking, suggesting that industrial neighbors, and of course the Battleship Texas and Monument State Park, that is right there as well, can consider sheltering in place. The park is closed today, so that's good. So there aren't people out there, but you know, neighboring industries should consider doing that, and of course anywhere near that ITC facility as well, people are asked to shelter in place.
And really, sort of what I've gleaned from the past week of watching this unfold is that calm winds are not good because it allows that gas to gather and concentrate. Strong winds would blow it into neighborhoods. But if we've got a very light wind, you know, maybe this is the best case scenario where it's just enough to get a little bit of mixing so it doesn't, you know, gather and concentrate.
And create respiratory problems and stuff that people were reporting when that benzene release. I want to ask you though, is there any rain in our forecast, and is that going to change any of this?
So that's a good question. I think, well, first of all, there is rain in the forecast for the weekend, but I think it's light and scattered, nothing severe. You know, if we had a strong springtime cold front coming in this weekend, that would be a great concern. Not only for the winds, which could disrupt the foam and the operation itself, trying to get this benzene loaded off and out of here, but also the heavy rain. That's not the forecast. The forecast is for a few passing showers. South breeze does increase a little bit, but there's nothing severe that should interrupt their operation. And the way we left it last night, they were hoping to get this offloading and container process done before the weekend. Is that right?
Yes, that's what they were trying to do. Not sure what this breach of a secondary perimeter will do as far as setting them back in terms of getting that cleanup done. We want to mention that we just heard from a spokesperson of ITC who, again, was saying there's so many chemicals from that tank, from those tanks in that area, and of course the foam and the water, all of that mixing. They don't know yet what was released. He also clarified that even though the collapse happened near tank 8070, it doesn't mean that the chemical that was in that tank is one of the ones that was released. Because again, we've had all but 4 tanks go down that burned, and we just don't know. It's a mix of everything. It was just a matter of just getting that fire out. So don't know what has been released, don't know how much of that has been released. So many unanswered questions right now. All we know is that the cleanup process has begun.
And you had a good question. So what would the rain mean?
Yeah, what would the rain mean? Because we're still monitoring our air quality and the possible benzene levels. There was a slight spike this morning, not anything to order a shelter in place, but still that is a concern for so many folks.
Well, there's no fire burning right now. So when that fire was burning and burning very, very hot, all the chemicals and gases that were being burned and all the soot and everything was rising upward because it was so hot. So hot air rises. So that you had that big smoke plume, and that took it straight up and into the atmosphere. Because there is no fire, and I'm not an expert on all these chemicals. I'm an expert on weather. I'm not an expert on all these chemicals. But in general, what is probably happening is those fumes are staying near the ground. because they're just not hot.
They're not hot,
So
yeah.
they're not going to rise. So they're going to stay at ground level, which is why we're doing all the monitoring and keeping you guys abreast of what's going on out there. So any rain that were to fall, you know, I assume, you know, when raindrops fall, they do gather whatever's in their path. Pollen granules are a great example.
Yeah.
They'll grab onto them and drop them down. That's why a light rain can make your allergies better, because it takes
Gets it out of the air.
it out of the air.
Yeah.
So I would assume that whatever's there, some of that rain would take it out of the air and put it to the ground. And then I guess rain would be more of a concern for runoff into the creeks and streams and Galveston Bay. But again, rain total forecasts are very, very light over the weekend. So I'm optimistic that the weather is going to cooperate. It won't be heavy rain, it won't be heavy wind, and they'll be able to continue.
No washout. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're saying that that will help them as far as the cleanup is concerned, not necessarily getting those chemicals down.
Because the chemicals shouldn't be very high above
Yeah.
the surface. There's no heat to raise it up. So
Phoner.
Josh, okay, who are we talking to
It's
now?
Sarah Gossett.
Okay.
Who's with Galveston Bay Foundation Water Quality Manager. They were out on a boat recently, like right in the last hour or so, measuring the water quality, and they obviously left because of what happened. So I'm going to put her off mute right now and have her talk to you.
Sarah.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah, this is Reka Mudaraj. You're live right now, and we're just going to ask you about the what you all experienced.
Hi, Sarah. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing all right, and it's my pleasure.
Tell me a little bit with the agency that you're with.
Yeah, so I work for the Galveston Bay Foundation. We are a nonprofit to preserve and protect Galveston Bay. And so within that, I work primarily with water quality and making sure that the waters in and around Galveston Bay remain fishable and swimmable, essentially healthy and safe for both the animals as well as the humans who rely on and enjoy the bay.
I'm sure the last couple of days with the ITC fire, with the concerns about the runoff, you were concerned enough that you got in a boat to get out there and test the water. Tell me what that's been like and what concerns you've had.
Yeah, so after an event like this, of course, one of our first questions is what are going to be the impacts to the water, both immediately around that type of an incident, as well as for the bay in general overall. Water, by its nature, does not stay in one place, and a lot of the contaminants and potential chemicals can flow throughout not just the Houston Ship Channel, but ultimately into Galveston Bay. And we really wanted to ensure that effective monitoring of this type of incident is occurring, and that we have good documentation of what the potential impacts might be, not just from this event, but also in response to this event, getting a good understanding of just what's happening both in that immediate vicinity as well as in the larger bay overall.
I know everything is very preliminary right now, but is there anything standing out in your findings? What have you been able to collect? Anything that is alarming or of concern that you've seen out in the water?
So we just completed collecting water samples from within the Houston Ship Channel. We're also partnering with Texas A&M and Environmental Defense Fund to collect more samples further downstream as well. So we've not been able to analyze the samples yet, so we do not currently have any results. But we will be testing for VOCs, which are going to help detect any potential chemicals that might be in the water, potentially from the fire, the tanks themselves, and anything that might have been released from the fire. We'll also be able to test for PFOs, which are found in a lot of the foam that is used to fight fires on the industrial scale, such as the foam that was used in this incident as well.
So Sarah, you were probably out in a boat collecting these samples when you heard about this partial breach of the, like an exterior dam, and the fact that they've now closed the ship channel. Were you out there? What exactly happened?
Yeah, so we were out there when we received word that that had happened, that the tank had collapsed. Personally, we did not see anything or notice the collapse at all, but we did start receiving notifications, both from some of our coworkers who knew we were out there, as well as from the U.S. Coast Guard notifying us that the ship channel was closed and that we needed to vacate the area as soon as possible. Which, of course, when you're out on a boat, you want to make sure that you're safe as well. So we were very fast in evacuating after that. And luckily, we had already collected all of the samples that we needed.
So what's next? When you test those samples, how soon will you get a reading?
Yeah, so we actually had the equipment to test this shipped down to us from California, so we should be able to start testing these water samples as soon as possible. And our hope is that we'll be able to have some readings in the next couple of days that we'll be able to utilize and respond to. And from there, depending on what we find, we'll definitely make sure to coordinate and work with all of the different agencies who are responding to this event, as well as the responsible parties, to ensure the best actions are taken to keep Galveston Bay and the surrounding waters healthy, clean, and respond as much as possible to any potential contamination that we see.
If you're just joining us, we are doing our Facebook Live. We are talking to Sarah Gossett. Is that right? Is that your last name? Gossett with the Galveston Bay Foundation. This organization has been taking water samples. David Paul is here. We've been talking about the weather. And also, if you are watching us online, we had an Air 11 shot up just a few minutes ago. Cameras is kind of in and out a little bit, but stay with us because we're getting our first look, our first aerial view of what we've been discussing for the last half hour or so, that partial breach of a secondary containment wall. This is, of course, on the north side of that ITC facility. So we are trying to get a perspective from all angles on this, and we are just updating you guys on the situation. So thank you so much. David, did you have any questions for Sarah as far as water quality or air quality, anything like that that maybe she could answer?
Sarah, I know that you're monitoring it and you're taking the water samples. If there are high levels of anything that's dangerous or toxic, what's the next step? What would you guys do if you came back with readings that were considered dangerous?
Of course, the first thing that we would do is share this information both with any potential agencies who are going to be responding to the incident, as well as the responsible party itself. We'll also be making sure that we're sharing those findings with the public as well. One of our priorities as a nonprofit organization is to make sure that the public who might be affected by these types of incidents are as aware and informed as possible, both on these findings as well as how they should be responding to those issues. From there, it definitely will depend on the response that we receive from all of the different parties who are responding to this incident, but we will do everything we can to ensure as much response and cleanup is occurring as possible.
Well, Sarah, what you're doing is very important. As you know, the
Sorry,
Bay,
David. I just want to let our viewers know, if you're watching us right now, Air 11 is live over the scene. We're taking a look at that partial breach of that containment wall. We're seeing some of those charred tanks right now from this perspective, but just a few seconds ago, you see a lot of liquid foam, and again, ITC not able to identify the chemicals that are in that liquid, but that have spilled out. They are setting up some booms in the area. At last check, that was according to the mayor of Deer Park, and they're already working on repairing that containment wall. Again, you're just looking at those charred tanks that had been burning for days, and just on the other side of that, that containment wall had breached, and some of, again, the foam, the water, everything that was used to fight that fire, along with the chemicals that were possibly coming out of those tanks, is spilling out of the area. There is no shelter in place for the city of Deer Park right now. There is a shelter in place for industrial neighbors. Of course, the ship channel just north of that, that's where our guest right now, who was called in, Sarah Gossett with the Galveston Bay Foundation, was.
Hey, Sarah, I'm curious. Did you smell anything?
Yeah, did you smell anything?
Yes, we did. So we actually had respirators that we brought with us to wear while we were out in the ship channel. From the boat launch where we launched, which was just north of the ship channel, at first on our way out, we could not smell anything. But as soon as you hit the ship channel, you could just smell. It was a very pungent smell, and so we immediately put on our respirators.
Yeah.
Coming back, you could actually still smell kind of that chemical industrial smell even at the boat ramp. And that was after we had received word of the shelter in place that had been instated, as well as the tank collapse.
So the ship channel, Galveston Bay, there is so much of, it's the main artery, one of the main arteries of economic impact here in Houston and Galveston, and of course all the fisheries and folks in the oyster beds. And so the work that you're doing to gather water samples and get us the information on what may or may not be in the water is so important. And again, just so people who are just joining us, there's been a breach. There may be some more chemicals leaking out of the facility. Sarah's on the phone with us, who is taking samples of water around Galveston Bay. How soon will you have those samples back? How soon will we know what you guys have gathered out there?
Yeah, so the samples that we collected today, we are hoping to have the results of those in the next several days. Ideally, the latest mid-next week, but we do hope that some of our partners at Texas A&M University, who are working with Environmental Defense Fund, are able to continue to collect samples over the weekend and even next week, so that we're able to get a better understanding of how the water is changing over time.
And who will you share those results with?
We will be sharing them through our own website, through our own social media pages, and depending on what we find, we'll be sharing them with the news as well. So you'll be able to view that at www.galvbay.org. That's our website.
One more time. www.galbay. Galvbay.
So it's like Galveston, but galvbay.org.
Okay. And that's where you'll put the results
up. You can also find us on Facebook at Galveston Bay Foundation, or on Twitter at G Bay Foundation.
I need to make sure I add you to my follower list immediately.
Yeah, these are great results. Sarah, thank you so much. You know, since you were just out there and you were pulled out of the ship channel because of this breach and the chemicals and the liquid that is spilling, what is your take on all of this? You clearly have been monitoring the water quality in Galveston Bay for a while now. You know what's good and what isn't. What is your take on the situation?
Of course, you never want something like this to happen. It's very sad, and of course, it has potentially large ramifications for the Bay in general, as well as for the economic livelihood of the area and the health of the residents around it. And so it's something that we really want to make sure is being responded to as effectively and efficiently as possible, and that we are able to determine what happened to prevent it from happening again.
Yeah. Sarah, thank you so much for the time in such a critical moment here in the history of the Bay and your work, and we really appreciate your, and this is a third party.
This is a third party, yes.
So independent
testing.
Which is what so many of our viewers were asking for. So Sarah, what you're doing is important. Thank you so much.
Sarah Gossett with the Galveston Bay Foundation. Thank you so much again. All right, you've been watching our aerial video from Air 11, and I'm stepping out of the shot because I can get a closer look at this scene. David, you see all these charred tanks.
I see the charred tanks. I wish that they could zoom in on where that breach
was happening. We were showing it just a little earlier when we were on the phone with Sarah, and I think our viewers could see that. You could see basically this white foam, the runoff that was coming down. I did not see the booms that were being set up. The mayor of Deer Park had mentioned that they immediately got those booms out there to obviously keep it contained, and then as they work to repair that containment wall. But we did not see that. But we definitely are seeing collapsed tanks. And
did they announce a timetable of when they thought they would be done with this process before this breach, this problem happened?
I am not sure on that, and I think what we'll do is maybe check in with one of our reporters. I know David Gonzalez has been at the Office of Emergency Management, and he heard something about that. But you remember hearing a timetable?
No,
okay.
I think they were just speaking in generalities.
Yeah, because they're still assessing, I guess, the breadth of this. I mean, this is really an incredible amount of damage that has happened to those tanks. Those fires went on for days.
And if I'm correct, they were not offloading it onto tankers. They were offloading it into another tank on the facility.
Tank on the facility, yes.
So, and I don't know if they had set up how are they going to do that? Were they going to set up a pipe and pump it in there. I think they had a lot of work left to do, and you're right. Maybe that's why they didn't have a set timetable.
They didn't have a specific timeline. Yeah, and I think it would be, especially with people so concerned about it. Matt Doherty
at ITC right now.
Okay, right. So one of our reporters, Matt Doherty, is out at ITC right now. Matt, you're on speakerphone. We're live on our Facebook Live. What's going on?
So where we are right now, we're at the ITC facility in Pasadena. It's just a couple miles away from their facility in Deer Park, the one that had the fire. So from what we understand, those workers there have had to shelter in place at that site, as well as some of the workers at the surrounding facilities, chemical facilities around that site for now. We've also understand that the San Jacinto battlegrounds have also been advised of the shelter in place as well after this partial breach of that secondary containment wall. We're still trying to get more information on what exactly this means. You know, we got this information, I don't know, I guess it was close to an hour ago now. But anyway, what we understand is that ITC did learn of a partial breach of the tank farm on that secondary containment wall. That was on the north side, they're saying, near tank 80-7. We still don't know exactly what chemicals were inside that specific tank, but we know that what they were doing with these containment walls and the dike that they had referenced in the past was that's how they were collecting all of the runoff from the foam and the water and trying to fight these fires over the past several days. All of that runoff and the chemicals and everything was being contained. Now we learn that there's been a partial breach of the secondary containment wall, so they're saying. So, you know, does that mean that that the rest of the area surrounding the facility has been exposed to these chemicals and all of the runoff? Does it mean that some of this has gotten into the ship channel? I mean, we learned just a few minutes ago that they've shut down the ship channel. So that was the greatest concern, was how to prevent all the runoff, how to prevent all of these chemicals from getting into the water supply there in Deer Park.
Yeah, and that's what everyone is wondering. What are the health impacts? What are the environmental impacts of this, if at all? I mean, it sounds like they have been working to contain that runoff, whatever spilled out, and so they're definitely working on that. But again, if you're watching this and you're seeing our shots from Air 11, we're finally up over the scene. We saw, David, all of that foam and runoff. You wonder, how are they going to get all of that contained? Because it's a lot. It's gallons. It appears to be gallons and gallons. And thousands of gallons.
If they've closed the ship channel,
yes, there's an issue.
They're concerned
Yeah.
that it may get into the ship channel.
Absolutely.
And of course, that's the entrance to the north side of Galveston Bay.
And we just talked to someone who was there who could smell it. They said they had a very strong chemical, pungent smell.
I was waiting to hear if she was going to say it was that sweet smell. That's the
Yes,
benzene
the
smell.
benzene, yeah.
But this is the secondary containment levee.
Wall, yes.
So there could be...
Yeah, and they keep mentioning tank 80-7, but then ITC officials have said, look, we don't know if the chemicals that have washed out are from that tank.
Yeah.
They could be from other tank, obviously mixed with the water and the foam that's been used to put out the fire. So a lot of unknowns right now.
Yeah, so a lot of effort being taken right now, as much as can be, to protect those chemicals from getting into the water supply, into the ship channel, into Galveston Bay. Again, they've shut down the ship channel. And it's this is one of those breaking news fluid situations where we are, you know, right now you see Reika and I, and we've got our live helicopter shot up over the facility, but there are people all around us who are intensely working to gather as much information and the latest information as possible on this. And of course, Sarah out there had to abandon ship as she was taking samples in the ship channel.
She's with the Galveston Bay Foundation, independently doing their own water quality study. Matt, is there anything else you can tell us out there? Anything you could see?
Well, I actually had a question for David. You know, do you remember any other time in history when the ship channel had to be shut down like this?
That's a good question.
All right, as you're listening to David's answer, this is what we're looking at. So this is that secondary wall that was breached, that containment wall that was breached around that ITC chemical storage facility. You can see the indentation right there. That's a pretty big chunk of the wall that's come down. And all of that white stuff is the foam, the chemical, the runoff that was coming out from in there. We don't know how that was breached.
No.
That's what we haven't figured out.
And Matt, to answer your question, the answer is no. I cannot remember a time when we had this level, this magnitude of a chemical spill and fire, and then threatening the waters of the ship channel and Galveston Bay. So no, I cannot remember that. Just to let you know, Matt, so you know, winds are out of the south, blowing south to north right now at 5 to 10 miles an hour. They're light. Hopefully that's just enough to mix whatever chemicals may be evaporating in the atmosphere and spread them out without allowing them to gather and become where they concentrate and become dangerous levels. And so far, up to this moment, we don't have any type of official shelter in place or warning for high levels of chemicals that are gathering, but we are monitoring for that as well. Matt, does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely. You know, some of the people that I've been talking to, some of my sources in the petroleum industry throughout the day, have been telling me that this is what they were really trying to prevent, because not only if these chemicals were to get into the ship channel, then make their way into Galveston Bay, would it have an immediate effect on some of the aquatic marine life out there, but the long-term effects have been researched and studied extensively, and they're significant.
Matt, David Paul here. I'm going to step aside. Ron Trevino is going to come on in. I'm going to go gather the latest weather information, guys.
All right.
Sounds good.
So Matt, where you are at the ITC facility in Pasadena, which you said is a few miles away, right, from where the fire took place in the chemical storage facility. And then you said that employees there, staff there, have been told to shelter in place. Is that correct?
Not at this facility where we're at, but from what we understand at the fire site over in Deer Park. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, we should mention that industrial neighbors in that area also being advised to shelter in place, but want to make sure we're very clear that folks living in the Deer Park neighborhood are not under a shelter-in-place order. Ron Trevino is joining us now. Ron,
and it looks like Jeremy
Rogalski has information. I'm going to let you talk to Matt. And Ron, have you learned anything? Jeremy, why don't you tell us what we're actually looking at right now?
So this is a Google Earth image from the area in question right here.
Okay.
I'm going to place my cursor over the tank farm that we've been talking about for several days. I just got off the phone with an ITC spokesperson. This is Independence Parkway heading north. This is what's known as Tidal Road. This is tank where my cursor is now 80-7. ITC confirms, and we just saw that from Air 11, that this is where that breach occurred, right about there where Air 11 just shot, and you could actually see that. Now, I want to move around because it's all about perspective. And if we zoom out a little bit here, just to give you perspective, off to the west, we have Tucker Bio.
Can we take the map full?
So there's Tucker Bio.
We're going to take this map full if you just give us 1 minute, Jeremy. That way our viewers can get a better idea. They don't need to see us in the small box right now. We're just going to take that map full, show you exactly what we're talking about. Perfect. Okay. So good. Our viewers can get a good idea. So you're looking at Google Maps. This is obviously an old picture. This is not what it looks like right now.
Right. But let's just, if we can, take it from the beginning again. So we just saw Air 11. If we get our bearings, these 15 tanks is the tank farm that have been on fire, for several days. And this one in the middle is tank 80-7. That's the tank that contained pie gas, which is a blend including benzene. The latest word, as of a couple of minutes ago, from an ITC spokesperson is this tank where my cursor is hovering over is the source, the location rather, of the breach.
Yes,
just to the north of it.
And not the source. We should mention they don't know if it came from that specific tank.
Is the location. Thank you for the clarification. And as we saw in Air 11, this area along here and right about here is where you actually can see that breach. And then there was some foamy water, spilling out into that breach. Now, for perspective, 225 is at the bottom of your screen. If we travel north to northwest, we get to the ship channel. There's Buffalo Bio, and tucked in here is Tucker Bio. So you obviously have two waterways, and I'm told right about here is where the ship channel has been closed temporarily by the U.S. Coast Guard. There's a little bit of a wider look here as we look at this area. So that gives you some perspective. We're at Buffalo Bayou, Tucker Bayou, and I'm just making sure I didn't lose my bearings here. There's the tank farm. Here's Tucker Bayou. Here's Buffalo Bayou. Ship channel is closed right about here, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, from a partial breach of that secondary containment wall down here. This is Independence Parkway heading north. And again, all this area is the ITC plan.
And they've had booms in place, though, right?
Certainly, they've had booms in place. They have booms in place, however, they weren't, I'm assuming, counting on this breach. And obviously, they don't know how many gallons. They don't know exactly what product. They don't know the concentration of the product. We do know that tank 87 did contain benzene. We don't know definitively if it's benzene that's now spilling out into this breached earthen dam.
So, Mayor, now that we've had an idea of what that secondary containment wall looks like, it looked like a more solid wall, but the mayor of Deer Park was saying that ITC put booms out as soon as the spill started to happen to just kind of contain it. So, again, we still haven't figured out how this containment wall was breached. I think that's a big question a lot of people are asking. Is it a result of, was it weakened by the flames and the fire that had been burning for several days? Did it kind of succumb to the pressure and the weight of all of that water and the liquid that's in there? So we're trying to figure that out as well.
Dr. Noreen is on speaker, and she can talk to you about.
Hi, Dr. Noreen Mayberry. We are on Facebook Live with you right now. And thanks for calling in, because we have a lot of questions for you. You've been giving us a great perspective, especially about what chemicals, the benzene that's been in the air, and the possible effects of it. When you hear, I guess let's start with when you hear about a breach of a containment wall that has all of these chemicals and the foam and the water and everything, what are your initial thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, my initial thoughts were, was the containment wall, or is the containment wall compatible to that kind of mixture of chemicals? Where these are very strong solvents. I mean, these are solvents that you find in gasoline. And so I'm wondering if possibly there were some incompatibilities, and maybe the containment wall was not of a sufficient material to handle that amount of chemicals, or is it an old containment wall? I mean, I haven't seen the condition of the containment wall. Well, you know, could there have been an accidental breach? Maybe it was something they reused that had, you know, some strength inefficiencies or deficiencies that caused this thing to break. I wish I could actually see, you know, how it broke. But to me, my first thought as a chemist toxicologist is that, you know, maybe the chemicals were just too much for that wall to handle, and it just broke down the material and leached. And these are the kind of things you have to consider when you are putting up containment, especially in a situation like this. You know, was there just too much volume? You know, was the weight too much? You know, there's a number of things to consider, but again, not having much details other than there was a break. This is not good, because all of these factors should be planned for up front when you know you're putting up a containment wall. And if you know you're putting up something that maybe might not be as strong as it should be temporary, and you should be trying to fortify that immediately.
And as you know, or maybe you don't know, the shelter in place is for the nearby industries and not for the city itself.
Deer Park.
Right. Yeah.
And it's still unclear, though, about that containment wall. I mean, it's by a bunch of charred giant tanks that house these chemicals, so maybe, you know, could the containment wall maybe have been affected by the fire that burned for so long, or just kind of feeling the weight and the pressure of all those chemicals and liquid and water and foam that have been poured onto those tanks? Is that a possibility as well?
You know, all of those are possibilities. You know, that's the thing. I don't know the weight. I don't know these things have their own vapor pressures. They have their own, you know, volumes, their molecular weight. They have auto ignition temperatures. You know, so all of these you have to consider when you're a chemical expert. When you're trying to put up containment, you can't just put garden variety containment up and think that it's going to hold all of these, you know, vapor chemicals mixed with the foam, mixed with, you know, the fire combustion byproducts. You can't, you know, just expect it to hold it. I'm not saying that's what they did, but what I'm saying is that there's a possibility, because these are strong solvents, mentioned, like, it could have just, it could have caused the breach. But again, without having clear evidence, all I know is that, there is a breach, and I'm worried about, water contamination at this point.
Right.
That water, and, in my opinion, I know that you test in water with immediacy, within an hour. So to not have results for 2-3 days, at least from the earlier news conference I saw was surprising as well. I think this would be a rush, super priority to be up and get us some data on this water.
Yeah, well, when we heard from officials this morning, they said they had 20,000 barrels of product still left that was going to take 8 to 12 hours to remove. So.
And because of, like I was saying, it's still a dynamic situation. That's why I'm like, the situation is not over. The fire's gone, but the situation in terms of exposure is not gone. Because once you move it, once you agitate everything, you've got the possibility, for the breaches.
Yeah, and that's what officials were saying this morning. They were saying the release of vapor still possible, and then you had this partial collapse of this containment wall.
Right. Now, I don't think that was expected at all.
No.
I mean, I can see breaches in the foam, letting out vapors being, anticipated. I was glad they were actually forthcoming to say that, but I highly doubt that they anticipated a breach in this containment wall.
Well, Doctor, what's your recommendation for people in the Deer Park area? As we said, there's no shelter in place for the city itself. I mean, what would be your recommendation as a doctor?
If you are, again, because you're so close to the site, I would definitely kind of go with some of the same things I've been saying in terms of pay attention to the signs and don't do a lot of strenuous exercise outdoors. Don't just open your windows and let the air in as well, because I don't know what the readings are currently, but they're going to be fluctuating. With this, even though it's going into the water now, some of that is getting into the air. And with that much product left over, I don't know how much is fully contained, sealed by the foam. And it's not like a real tight seal. It's just almost like a cover. And that's why it was able to crack yesterday and let the benzene vapors out. Those kind of things are going to happen again, because the foam was to put out the fire, not to contain the chemical.
Can you run over again what symptoms people need to be looking out for if they live in the Deer Park area?
So, burning eyes, hoarseness, sore throat, any asthma-like symptoms, wheezing. Even if you've never had asthma before, there are people that are presenting with wheezing and asthma-like symptoms, asthmatic symptoms. So, headache, any kind of upper respiratory distress. You need to not stay out. You need to seek medical attention.
All right. Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. Thanks so much for your words of wisdom, medically speaking, and we'll be talking to you later in the day. I'm sure of that. Thank you so much.
Ron, I want to interrupt you right now. We've heard some news about the ship channel, at least a portion of it being closed. I have Steve Nerheim, spokesperson with the Coast Guard, with us. Steve, can you hear me, sir?
I can.
Give us the latest on the situation at the ship channel, if you could.
Well, the situation is still developing, but a little after noon, the berm around the tanks at ITC that contained the foam, the firefighting water, and whatever residual fuel or chemicals were in there gave way, and the deluge flooded out Tucker's Bayou and overwhelmed the booms that were there to contain the firefighting water, foam, and chemicals. We have closed the Houston Ship Channel from the area just above Tucker's Bayou down to what the mariners would refer to as Beacon or Light 122, Buoy 122.
So
that area just above Peggy's Lake, it's about 3 miles of waterway or 4 miles of waterway, linear miles are closed.
So that's what.
Include the mouth of the San Jacinto and the Old River.
Okay, so for perspective on what's closed, then you're talking about 3 miles or so of the Houston Ship Channel. From what point to what point again, sir?
From just above Tucker's Bayou, just above ITC, and across from Jacinto Port, down to roughly Peggy's Lake.
And for those of us who are not too familiar, Peggy's Lake would be to the west or to the east of ITC?
It's to the east. It's toward the sea, but it's about 3 or 4 miles above the Exxon refinery.
Okay, and why is that? Is it just that you don't want
we have
vessel
an
traffic?
unknown amount and an unknown quality or an unknown quantity of material in the ship channel, and to prevent it being further spread or to be picked up in the internal cooling water systems of transiting vessels, we've just suspended transiting operations. To put it in context, we closed a part of the waterway yesterday to submerge a dredge pipeline. And so a short-term planned closures of the Houston Ship Channel are nothing unusual. When they're unexpected, they catch a bunch of people and people are wrong-footed, but we very quickly were able to secure traffic, to stop traffic. So the biggest issue there is that transiting vessels going through that spill area, however extensive it turns out to be, are not going to be entraining that fuel or whatever pollutants there are and spreading it up and down the ship channel.
What have you been able to observe out there, or your men and women out there? Have they been able to see anything that looks like it might be leaking toward the ship channel?
Well, as I said, the berm around that 15-tank mini tank farm at ITC collapsed, and so there has been a deluge into the ship channel. I have not had any on-scene reports other than from mariners who report a light sheen down in the lower part of the waterway. And we can see on our closed-circuit TV cameras that support the vessel traffic service that there's a fair amount of oil in the ship channel, a fair amount of something in the ship channel. I can't tell from looking at the camera what it is. We're awaiting analysis. Please keep in mind that this only just happened, and so we're trying to assess what is actually in the channel. We know there is something in the channel. We know it's covering a fairly extensive area, and out of caution to prevent it from spreading or contaminating vessels that might go further up the channel, we've just suspended operations. I do not know at this point the duration of that. It might be relatively brief. It might go on for a day or so. But I don't think that there's enough contamination there that it's going to be an extensive closure. But if I said anything definitively, I'd be telling you more than I know.
And hang with us just for a minute, folks out there in Facebook land. If you're just joining us, we are talking with Steve Neerheim, a spokesperson with the U.S. Coast Guard, bringing us up to the minute on a partial closure of the Houston Ship Channel, all due to a partial breach of a containment wall outside the ITC chemical storage tank facility that occurred, just about an hour and 15 minutes ago, roughly around 1 o'clock. Is that right,
It was
Ron?
around 1:15, I'm sorry, 12:15, 12:30.
Okay, thank you. So we're approaching the second hour now. Steve Neerheim, if you can just stay with us for a couple more questions. You said, speaking to other mariners on the waterway, they described what to you in the last hour or so, sir?
Well, the initial report we got was of sheening, which is just the rainbowy looking bits you see on the surface of water. You see it in a mud puddle in your parking lot probably after it's rained. This is on the water, and it was down at the Bosco terminal, which is just below Peggy's Lake, maybe a mile or two above the Exxon refinery. It's worth noting that the closure that the VTS, the Vessel Traffic Service, put in place is only above the Battlefield Oil storage terminal, and the Exxon refinery, the Bayport, Barbers Cut container terminals, and everything below that is unaffected. But we are talking about essentially the riverine portion of the Houston Ship Channel.
And just for clarification, traffic coming in from Galveston Bay would be halted at that point, correct? I mean, there's no vessels coming in.
Yes, they're not going to become above, say, the Bosco terminal.
All right.
And chemicals getting into the ship channel, wouldn't that be one of the worst case scenarios? And how long lasting would the effects be?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know what the chemical is, and any assessment of that would be premature. What we were dealing with initially was the firefighting foam. It's called AFFF, aqueous film forming fluid, that makes that big foamy stuff that you see in the disaster movies, but firefighters putting down on airport runways. It's what you use to contain an oil fire, or to cover an oil fire, smother an oil fire. That's on the water, and then there was an underlayment of that, of ash, the soot from the fire, and beyond that, the chemical composition of that, I do not know. The chemical composition of what spilled into the ship channel, I do not know, but there were 15 tanks at ITC involved, and the slurry or the mixture of that is the constituent parts of whatever might have made it into the ship channel. But it's premature to say what made it in there.
And finally, and then we'll let you go and get back to work, Steve, have there been additional containment measures on the ship channel, berms and the like, just since this incident unfolded here now about an hour and a half or 2 hours ago?
Well, the existing booms were quite adequate to the normal outflow. They weren't adequate to contain the failure of the berm, the embankment ashore. All tank farms have a berm around them, just raised ground. It's designed to contain a predictable level of spill. But this berm, I guess, was just weakened by being containing stuff for 4, 5, or 6 days and collapsed. I don't know the cause of that. That'll probably be the subject of another investigation.
Right,
but there's booming on the ship channel. There's plenty of booms available here, this being the petrochemical capital of the world, and people are working even now to rig additional booming to try to contain this, to corral it, and we're very proficient here. All the expertise in the world on oil spill and oil spill cleanup exists to support the Houston ship channel in this monstrous petrochemical complex. So I'm confident that we'll be back in business as soon as we safely can without spreading the pollutants over a more extensive area than nature has.
So there are efforts as we speak underway with various vessels. You said reconfiguring those booms in the waterway. Safe to say that's going on as we speak, as we have more product dumping into the ship channel?
Well, I don't, and I think whatever came out of the berm was one deluge, but that's 12 miles from where I'm sitting right now. I haven't got eyes on the target, but we're going to get more information on that. The KHOU shot John's going to have to wait. My job, or my narrow function in this process, is to get ship traffic moving as soon as it is safe and as soon as we can make sure we're taking reasonable means to protect the environment.
You know, one of our viewers who's watching made this comment. Cynthia Romero said, hi, sir, this is Reka Motoraj with KHOU 11 News. One of our viewers was just making this comment that said that, you know, during this morning's press conference, they were emphasizing their efforts to keep the foam as a containment measure that kept the chemicals from dispersing in the air. And now they are leaking into the ship channel, which many say, hey, it's already contaminated. I guess, what is the levity of this situation? I mean, is this something that you are increasingly concerned about?
Well, until I know what the product is that got spilled into the ship channel, yes, I'm concerned, but we've taken the appropriate initial action from my narrow perspective, which is as a director of the Vessel Traffic Service, managing the vessel traffic on the Houston Ship Channel. We've closed that to transiting vessels. The on-scene expertise at ITC's Incident Command Post includes representatives of the Environmental Protection Agency, and I know they have their own Joint Information Center, probably having a press conference of their own, or will very shortly, and they're the folks who both have the authority and the expertise to speak to atmospheric contamination or pollution.
Have you heard anything about how as to how this wall was breached in the first place? Was this?
No, ma'am, I do not know.
They haven't revealed it.
Gave way under the stress of back pressure water. I think it's got more product in it than it might have been designed to contain. But again, I may be telling you more than I know by saying that.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. Let's see if we have any. So this is Steve Nierheim with the U.S. Coast Guard. Thank you so much for talking to us. Is there anything else that we need to know? Any concerns that people should be aware of in the next couple of days?
No, this is not an area that's heavily trafficked by recreational boaters. Part of it's in the Coast Guard security zone. Part of it's not. It's going to be a nice weekend, but I'd recommend people check with the information sources that they normally use to boat safely before recreationally entering that area. My vessel traffic service communicates with the professional mariners, the ships, and the inland towing vessels and the harbor tugs. But the recreational boaters would be well advised to take a good look around and perhaps find another place to recreate this weekend.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We really appreciate
your. Thank you for sharing this information with the public of Harris County.
Thank you very much.
Now, they got a big job ahead, as they're still working on the booms along the ship channel to contain the chemicals that have gone into the ship channel.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get back in here as we...
Well, we want to let everybody know that we're right now on we're on the web on KHOU.com. We're on the
Your mobile
our
devices?
mobile app as well. We're on YouTube and on Facebook. We're on all the social sites, all our platforms right now. As we give you the very latest on what happened today, a breach of one of the containment areas in that tank farm, and right now we're trying to get more information about what happened, how it happened. We know that there's a shelter in place that's been recommended for the nearby industries north of ITC, but not for the city.
Not for the city of Deer Park, no. So those areas are okay right now. But, you know, this happened around, what, 12:15, 12:30, and we're just sort of initially getting all of this information in. We've been able to show you aerial views of just, I guess, how much has spilled out. Still trying to figure out several things, though, and we're waiting to hear from ITC officials, and we may not get these answers for a couple of hours because they are assessing the situation. How did that containment wall break?
And it's going to make things more complicated, you would think, for all the workers out there, because this morning before they had the breach, they said there was 20,000 barrels of product out there that was going to take 8 to 12 hours to remove.
And then this obviously hinders those efforts.
And they did say that there was a possibility of some vapors possibly escaping, and then we had this incident during the noon hour to further complicate things.
So, Ron, I'm following our Facebook Live on my mobile device, which so many of you can do as well, because we are on all platforms, Facebook, YouTube, streaming on our KHOU 11 website. We are getting, Kayla Cox is asking, is Galveston affected? You know, right now, people have been talking about the water quality so much, and especially of Galveston Bay. And just a little earlier, we talked to Sarah Gossett. She's with the Galveston Bay Foundation. They were out there independently getting their own water samples. They're hoping, the good news was, it's interesting, the timing matched up that they were in the ship channel getting those water samples when they were told to get out of the ship channel because they were closing it. But she said they managed to get enough that they'll be testing it in the next couple of days, and that they will be looking at the water quality. Obviously, because people, fishing, you know, ocean life, everyone's seafood, swimming in that water, people are concerned about the runoff from this affecting that. But just to let you know that that's what they're looking at.
But it's going to take several days to get the results.
It's going to take several days to get those results, yeah. She said thankfully they were able to get their water samples before they were told to leave, but this might change that. This might change the readings in the next couple of days after this. So they may have to go, may have to go back out there again to check the water samples and again do another round of testing, because so many things continue to happen. I'm just going to look through some of your Facebook comments. Please keep them coming. We're so happy that you're joining us, and we're happy to share this news with you because we want to keep you informed on this situation. We keep hearing the word this is a dynamic situation. That's from ITC officials and other local, state, federal officials. But it really is. The fire may be out, but we've had so many other incidents to report on since Wednesday morning when the fire was officially out.
And of course, like everybody's saying, health is the #1 concern, and that's why everybody's so concerned right now. You know, what does this mean for their health? But I mean, the good news is that whatever they've deemed the danger to be, it's not so bad that they have to tell the city to shelter in place. That's not necessary, just for the people who work nearby.
This is the first I'm hearing of this, but Vanessa Cooper posted saying, what about the drinking water in Deer Park? It has an odor in the water. I guess that's a new question that we haven't heard, so maybe we're going to get back to you on that. Just wanted to let you know that we got your question, and we're going to get on it and see if we can get some answers for you. If there is indeed that odor.
Well, we spoke with the mayor earlier.
Okay,
maybe the mayor could answer this question.
Could answer that question. Okay, so drinking water.
Whatever the situation was this morning, maybe it's different now. You know, everything's changing so quickly.
Perfect. Anything else that you guys want to let us know about? Just go ahead and comment on our Facebook Live. Let's see what else we've got here. Why?
Oh, we have got somebody on the phone here.
Professor Daniel Cohan, Rice, on the phone.
Wonderful.
Right now.
Professor Daniel Cohan from Rice on the phone. Can you hear us?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I can hear you.
Professor,
what is your specialty? I'm sorry.
I'm an atmospheric scientist. I specialize in air pollution and atmospheric chemistry.
Wonderful. You're the right person we wanted to talk to. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ron.
so tell us what's going through your mind right now, given today's events.
Right, at this point, a lot unknown. I think it's not clear how much is leaking through this breach and what's going to come from it. At this point, there's not clear evidence of a problem in the air. When I look at the data from the monitors as of a couple hours ago, which is the latest data available, really don't see any cause for concern at the monitors closest to the site.
Yeah, well, that's some good news, but I guess another issue might be what is leaking into the ship channel.
Right. It seems like we're not sure yet what is leaking out. Definitely seems to be a possibility of benzene, and these tanks contain so many different toxic compounds that a lot that needs to be tested for.
We've had spills in the ship channel before, and there's a lot of booms out there. I guess one thing we have going in our favor is the fact that we've heard before, being the petrochemical capital of the world, we've got a lot of that cleanup equipment here in this area.
Right, a lot of cleanup equipment here, and really more monitoring of the air and water around here than just about anywhere else in the country.
Well, Doctor, have you ever seen anything like this before?
Unfortunately, this is all too common, not necessarily at this scale, but having, at various scales of malfunctions and events where you have leaks into the air, leaks into the water, where they have to flare off sites. Of course, after Hurricane Harvey, there were a huge number of incidents in the Arkema fire that happened then, but there's so many events that really don't make the headlines that we treat as all too common. Really, scarcely does a couple months pass by without some sort of a leak or other incident happening.
Professor Cohen, this is Rika Mudaraj. My question to you is this latest issue that we're talking about, the breach of this containment wall, these chemicals coming out and the ship channel closing as a result, obviously to help keep those chemicals from getting into the water. That's a big concern. Yesterday we had the concern with the air quality and obviously talking about benzene levels. With this latest incident today, how worried should we be?
Today, it really just has so many unknowns that, at least from the reporting I've heard, we don't know exactly what product might be leaking to the water. We don't know how much there is, and so it's really a dynamic situation where we don't know for sure how bad it's going to be. So far, at least looking at the air measurements, there haven't been any readings today that would give me huge concern, but we don't have the absolute latest data, and we don't know what's going into the water and how much of it.
Well, you look at the bigger picture. I mean, obviously we all rely on the petrochemical industry, but I mean, what do you see as a professor to prevent some of these things from happening?
Right. The petrochemical industry has done an amazing job of cleaning up its routine emissions. So if you look at what's coming out on a day-to-day basis, the routine amount of emissions have come way down. But what we still have problems with is there are too many of these what's sometimes called exceptional events. When something goes wrong, they have to shut down, start up. You have fires and flares going on, and there hasn't been enough steps taken to make sure that these events don't happen. And so we're in a situation where we actually have very clean air for the majority of the year, but too many of these incidents happening where there's really cause for concern.
All right. Any last words you'd like to give us as a professor who studies this kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, from the air perspective, it's really been three very different phases to this event. We had the black smoke plume that was hanging over all of us across the region, very dramatic, but fortunately was staying at pretty good heights, and then have had a very different situation the past 2 days as the fire is gone, which meant that these air toxics were able to evaporate into the air nearby, and now we have a situation today with this breach that I think just so many unknowns about what's happening today and going forward.
Yeah, I think everybody can agree this has gone on way too long. Just when you thought it was over, it's not quite over, especially when you're dealing with chemicals of this fashion. Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor. Thanks for joining us.
All right, and Again, just to wrap this up, we've been live since this happened around 12:15, 12:30 this afternoon. Just wanted to let you know about that partial breach of a secondary containment wall around that IFC chemical tank facility. They are working actively to get that leak under control. We know that the mayor of Deer Park said that they've set up booms. We've seen that via Air 11. We've had an aerial view of the situation right now. But there is a lot of cleanup to do, and this really just has added to the amount of things that need to be done in the after effects of this fire that we've seen over the last couple of days.
Good news is there's no shelter in place.
No shelter in place
for
for
the
Deer
city
Park.
of Deer Park, but there is one recommended for the industries nearby ITC.
Absolutely. So we're going to wrap this up. We're going to bring you the very latest coming up at 4 o'clock. I'm Rekha Muttaraj with Ron Trevino. Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate you tuning in. Keep sending us those questions. We've been broadcasting this not only on our Facebook page, but on our webpage, KHOU.com. You can see this on your mobile devices, YouTube, obviously Facebook. We have updates on Twitter. So we just want to make sure we keep you informed, and we thank you for joining us and making sure that we get the best information and the correct information out to you guys. So thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, and we're monitoring everything, so we're not going to hesitate to get back on our social media sites to break in, or even on the air, depending on what happens. Until then, we'll see you at 4 o'clock.